How Islam spread in India. Lessons for today. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Long before the borders, long before kingdoms, long before flags and nations, there was dawah, the message of peace traveling from one heart to another, one shore to the next. And among the most beautiful lands that this light touched was India. But Islam did not reach India through swords or soldiers. It reached through sincerity, trade, justice, and character. Through the smiles of merchants, the patience of scholars, and the hearts of Sufis who carried the Quran not just in their hands, but in their lives. Mallam Jiji says, "When faith is real, it doesn't need armies, it needs hearts that shine." In the 7th century, Arab traders sailed across the Arabian Sea to Kerala. They brought spices and goods. Yes, but more than that, they brought honesty. The people of India saw something different. A people who spoke the truth, who kept their word, who treated rich and poor alike. And through that honesty, they saw Islam. From Sindh to Bengal, from Gujarat to the Deccan, the light spread, not by force, but by akhlaq, by the moral beauty of the believers. When the Prophet said, "The best among you are those who have the best manners and character." Bukhari. He was preparing hearts like theirs, hearts that would one day carry Islam to faraway lands. India became a home for Quran reciters, Sufi saints, and scholars who lived among the people, healed them, fed them, and taught them the name of Allah through compassion. The truth is, Islam in India grew from the soil of love. Love for Allah, love for people, love for justice. And today, as we watch a world filled with conflict, anger, and division, the story of Islam's spread in India reminds us. The most powerful dua is not the one shouted, it's the one lived. Mallam Jiji says, "India didn't fall to Islam, it rose to its light." So come with me on this journey. Let us uncover how Islam entered this land, not as a conqueror, but as a healer. Let us learn from their example how we too can spread peace, faith, and light in our time. But before we begin, remember this. Every Muslim today carries the same duty those early traders carried, to be a walking message of Islam. Because dua is not only done by tongue, it's done by life. So type "spread light, not hate" in the comments if you believe in peaceful dua. Thumbs up like this video, share across nations. And subscribe to Minbar of Wisdom, where we revive the history of Islam to heal the world of today. The first light, how Islam reached the Indian shores. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Before the muezzin's call ever echoed across Indian lands, before masajid rose, before scholars preached, light was already sailing toward India. Not on horses, not in armor, but upon ships carried by merchants who feared Allah and loved truth more than gold. It was the 7th century. The message of Islam had just begun to spread from Arabia, reaching beyond the deserts into the blue waters of the Indian Ocean. Arab traders, guided by honesty and barakah, sailed toward the coasts of Malabar, today's Kerala. They came seeking trade, but what they brought was something priceless. When they spoke, they did not deceive. When they weighed spices, they did not cheat. When they made promises, they kept them, for they believed the words of the Prophet. "Whoever cheats us is not one of us." Sahih Muslim. And the people of India noticed. They had seen merchants before, from Persia, from China, from faraway lands. But these traders were different. Their speech was gentle, their hands were clean, their faces filled with light. And slowly, quietly, the people began to ask, "Who are you? What faith makes you this honest?" And thus, the first seeds of Islam were planted, not by debate, but by example. The conversion of King Shahriman Perumal. History records a legend, both beautiful and mysterious, that the local ruler, Shahriman Perumal, saw a dream of the moon splitting in two, a dream that confused him until Arab merchants arrived and told him of the miracle of the Prophet Muhammad. Moved by the signs, he traveled to meet the Prophet himself, embraced Islam, and became known as Tajuddin. While historians differ on the details, one truth remains. The hearts of India were opening, not to politics but to prophecy. Mallam Jiji says, "When truth travels with sincerity, even oceans cannot stop it." The spread across the coasts. From Kerala, Islam flowed eastward through trade routes. Merchants settled in Gujarat, in Bengal, and along the Konkan coast. They built small masajid, not grand palaces, but humble spaces where they prayed 5 times a day and treated people with fairness. These were not conquerors, they were ambassadors of faith. Their ships carried goods, yes, but also carried trust, humility, and light. The people who did business with them saw something no temple or idol could give. A religion that made a man love truth, even when no one was watching. The power of character. Let me know, my brothers and sisters. Islam entered India not through blood, but through akhlaq. The Prophet said, "I was sent only to perfect good character." Musnad Ahmad. And that character became the most powerful dua. No loud speeches, no armies, just believers who lived the Quran. When others lied, they were truthful. When others oppressed, they showed justice. When others divided, they united. The Hindus and the Buddhists who lived alongside them began to say, "These people are trustworthy. Their God must be true." A lesson for our time. Mallam Jiji says, "What conquered India was not force. It was faith lived out loud." And that is the lesson we must learn again today. In a world where people fear Islam because of misinformation, the most powerful dua remains what it was 1,400 years ago, the example of a believer who lives with Isin. Every Muslim is a messenger, not by title, but by conduct. Every time you speak with honesty, you are continuing what those early traders began. Every time you forgive, you are preaching without words. Every time you help your neighbor, you are spreading Islam more effectively than 1,000 arguments online. The same light that reached Kerala can reach every corner of the earth again, if Muslims carry themselves as true representatives of mercy and truth. So let the world see again what India saw then, a faith that brings justice, compassion, and light. Let us be the new traders of truth, spreading Islam not by power, but by presence. If you believe dua begins with character, type, "I will be a light of Islam," in the comments. Then like, share, and subscribe to Minbar of Wisdom, where we revive forgotten stories that remind us. Islam is not a religion of conquest, but of conscience. The Sufi path, hearts that heal the nation. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Long after the merchants had planted the seeds of Islam, a new wave of light began to move across India. Not from the sea, but from the hearts of men devoted to Allah. They were not kings. They were not warriors. They were the Sufis, men of Daik, men of love, men whose tears soften nations. The arrival of the Aliyah. When Islam spread further into India during the 11th and 12th centuries, the Aliyah of Allah, saints, scholars, and Sufis began to arrive. They carried no swords, but hearts full of Quran, remembrance, and compassion. Among them were names still blessed on the tongues of millions today. Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti of Ajmer, Hazrat Nizamuddin Aliya of Delhi, Baba Fariduddin Ganshakar, and Shah Jalal of Bengal. They spoke softly, yet their words echoed through centuries. They healed hearts broken by caste, poverty, and spiritual emptiness. They taught Islam not as a foreign rule, but as a divine cure for the soul. The message of Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti, Ajmer Sharif. Mallam Jiji says, "When the people are divided by ego, Allah sends a servant of humility." In the deserts of Ajmer, one such servant arrived. Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti, Rahimahullah, also known as Garib Nawaz, the helper of the poor. He preached no politics. He built no palace. He simply opened his doors, feeding the hungry, comforting the lonely, guiding the lost. His khanqa, his Sufi lodge, became a place where Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and all seekers could sit, eat, and listen. Through love, he conquered hearts. Through character, he transformed cities. He said, "Develop river-like generosity, sun-like affection, and earth-like hospitality." And India listened. The Chishti and the Qadiri orders. The Chishti and Qadiri Sufis became the pulse of Indian Islam. They took the essence of Tawhid, the oneness of Allah, and blended it with service, music, poetry, and compassion. Their gatherings, the mehfils of Daikar and Qawwali, became tools of remembrance. Their words are simple, yet deep. Your Lord is closer than your breath. Find him not in walls, but in your heart. People who had once feared religion found peace in Islam's spiritual beauty. The message was clear: to know Allah is to love his creation, healing a divided society. Before Islam, India's society was deeply divided by caste and privilege. But the Sufis saw no high or low. They sat with peasants and kings the same way, seeing every soul as a servant of the most merciful. They opened kitchens, langars, that fed the hungry without asking name or status. They taught, service to man is the highest form of worship. It was not a slogan, it was Islam in action. And soon, the love of these saints began to soften even the hardest hearts. The secret of their power. Mallam Jiji says, the secret of the Sufis' power was not in their miracles, but in their manners. They had what we call adab, discipline, humility, and purity of heart. They carried no arrogance, no greed, no self-promotion. Their dua was sincere, their hearts alive with Quran. They lived simply, slept little, and gave much. And that sincerity gave them influence kings could never buy. While rulers built forts, they built faith. While kings sought control, they sought connection. Lessons for our time. Today, in a world drowning in noise and ego, we need the spirit of the Sufis again. Men and women who speak softly but change hearts deeply. We don't need more arguments. We need more akhlaq. We don't need more fame. We need more fana, the disappearance of ego before Allah. When we live with sincerity, even those who don't share our faith will respect our truth. That is how Islam truly spread in India, through love, not labels, through service, not superiority. So let your heart be a khanqa, a home for remembrance. Let your hands feed, let your words heal, let your smile be dua. If you believe that love is the greatest form of dua, type "spread Islam through love" in the comments. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe to Minbar of Wisdom, where we bring forgotten history back to life, and where every story reminds you. The greatest miracle is a kind heart that remembers Allah. The Mughal era, when power met piety. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. There comes a time in every nation's story when faith meets power and the soul of a people is tested. In India, that moment came with the rise of the Mughal Empire, an empire that would shine with brilliance and contradictions, beauty and weakness, faith and politics, piety and pride. It was a time when minarets touched the clouds, but the hearts of men decided whether that height meant humility or hubris. The arrival of the Mughals. The Mughals entered India in the early 16th century, led by Zahiruddin Babur, the great-grandson of Timur and Genghis Khan. But what he built was not merely a kingdom. It was a civilization rooted, at least in its beginning, in Islamic vision and ethics. From Babur's diary, the Baburnama, we see a man who prayed, who cried, who struggled to live righteously even in battle. And with his victory came not just the sword, but the seed of what would become one of the greatest Muslim dynasties in history. Akbar, the question of faith and rule. Then came Akbar the Great, a ruler both praised and questioned in equal measure. He expanded the empire's borders, built magnificent cities like Fatehpur Sikri, and brought scholars of all religions to his court. He wanted unity, but sometimes unity without truth. He sought peace among men, but in that journey, he began to blur the lines of faith. His experiment, Din-i-Ilahi, the divine religion, was an attempt to merge Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, and other faiths into one. But Mallam Jiji says, when you mix light with darkness, the flame dies. True unity is not in blending truth with falsehood, but in standing with mercy, justice, and sincerity, the pillars of Islam. And Allah reminds us in the Quran, "For you is your religion, and for me is mine." Surah Al-Kafirun 109:6. Aurangzeb, the scholar on the throne. Then came Aurangzeb Alamgir, the most devout of all Mughal emperors. He memorized the Quran, wrote it with his own hands, and governed by Sharia principles. While some historians accused him of rigidity, his personal life reflected humility and obedience to Allah. He lived simply, earned his own income by stitching caps, and left behind not gold, but a legacy of piety. Under his reign, justice was feared, but the heart of the empire was disciplined by faith. Mallam Jiji says, "A king's true crown is taqwa, not jewels." When rulers worship Allah sincerely, the land finds peace. When rulers chase power, the people lose purpose. The builders of beauty. The Mughal age also gave the world monuments of devotion, like the Jama Masjid of Delhi, the Badshahi Masjid of Lahore, and the Taj Mahal. But what made these monuments special was not their size. It was the spirit that inspired them. Each brick whispered the remembrance of Allah. Each dome pointed upward, reminding souls of the eternal kingdom beyond kings. The Quran says, "In the houses which Allah has permitted to be raised, His name is mentioned therein. Men glorify Him therein morning and evening." Surah An-Nur 2400 hours 36. Even stone can carry dua when it is built in the name of Allah. The fall, when power forgot purpose. But as the years passed, power began to corrupt the hearts of those who came after. Luxury replaced simplicity. Politics replaced prayer. The sword of justice became a tool of greed. And as the hearts of the rulers weakened, the empire began to crumble, not by foreign invasion alone, but by spiritual erosion. Mallam Jiji says, "No nation falls from the outside until it first falls from within. When Diker leaves the palace, division enters the land. When kings forget the masjid, Allah removes their barakah." The Mughal story reminds us, faith builds civilizations, but forgetting Allah destroys them. Lessons for our time. Today, we build skyscrapers taller than minarets, but our hearts are often lower than dust. We quote history, but forget humility. We seek kingdoms, but neglect our souls. From Babur's courage, Akbar's curiosity, and Aurangzeb's piety, we can learn this. Islam flourishes not through conquest, but through consistency in faith. Power will fade, but piety endures. So, O believer, don't wait to rule a kingdom to become righteous. Rule your soul first. Be the emperor of your own heart. If you believe taqwa is the true power of a Muslim, type, "I choose faith over fame" in the comments. Then like, share, and subscribe to Minbar of Wisdom, where history speaks not of empires, but of hearts that remembered Allah. The fall and the British invasion, the test of faith. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Every empire rises with faith, and falls when faith fades. The story of Islam in India was once written in gold and calligraphy. But then came the time when the ink began to dry, and the hearts of Muslims forgot the power that once made them strong, obedience to Allah. When Barakah left the palace, after the death of Emperor Aurangzeb in 1707, the Mughal throne became a shadow of what it once was. Princes fought for power, armies fought for land, and the scholars who once advised the throne were silenced or ignored. In the absence of unity came chaos. In the absence of taqwa came greed. The palaces glittered, but the mosques grew quiet. And Mallam Jiji says, "When the adhin fades, the empire fades with it." This was not just the fall of rulers. It was the test of an entire ummah. The coming of the British. While Muslims quarreled among themselves, ships from across the ocean carried a different kind of conqueror. They did not arrive with faith. They arrived with flags, trade, and deception. The British East India Company, under the guise of commerce, began to sow division, exploit greed, and build alliances with local rulers. By the 18th century, the once mighty Mughal Empire was reduced to a symbol. Its emperor, a prisoner in his own palace. The Quran had warned us, and never will Allah change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. Surah Ar-Raid 13:11. We changed, not in clothing, but in hearts. Our unity became pride. Our wealth became waste. And so, Allah sent a test. The 1857 revolt, the cry of a dying empire. When the British began to disrespect religion and exploit Muslim soldiers in their army, a great resistance rose. The Indian Rebellion of 1857. Muslims and Hindus stood side by side for a brief moment, fighting for honor, for freedom, for faith. But the rebellion was crushed. Cities like Delhi, Lucknow, and Kanpur witnessed rivers of blood. The last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was exiled to Burma, and the Mughal throne, which once stood as a symbol of Islamic power, was no more. But as the walls fell, faith remained. The believers knew Allah's kingdom never collapses, only man's pride does. Scholars and resistance. In the ashes of the empire rose the scholars, men who refused to let Islam die. From Shah Waliullah of Delhi came the revival of knowledge, calling Muslims back to Quran and Sunnah. From Sayyid Ahmad Shahid Barelvi came the spirit of jihad and purification. And later, from Deoband, a small town in northern India, emerged a seminary that would protect Islam through knowledge, creating scholars who carried the torch of faith even under colonial rule. Mallam Jiji says, when the palace falls, the madrasa must rise. And indeed, that is what saved Islam in India. Faith under chains. The British sought not just to rule, they sought to reshape the Muslim mind. They replaced Arabic with English, madrasa with modern schools, and tried to turn Muslims into citizens who admire their masters. But Allah promised in the Quran, they plan, and Allah plans, and Allah is the best of planners. Surah Al-Anfal 8:30. And his plan was stronger. Even in prisons, Muslims memorized Quran. Even under surveillance, scholars taught hadith in whispers. Even when mosques were locked, hearts remained open. The chains of the body could not imprison the soul of the believer. Lessons for today. Mallam Jiji says, the British invasion may be over, but the spiritual colonization continues today. They no longer come with guns. They come through screens, through ideas, through distractions. They want to conquer our minds, not our lands. But the same cure that saved Islam then will save us now. Knowledge, unity, and taqwa. When Muslims return to the Quran and strengthen their brotherhood, no power on earth can break them again. So, my brothers and sisters, remember the lesson of the Mughal fall. When we forget Allah, He reminds us through loss. When we remember Him again, He restores our dignity. If you believe knowledge is the shield of faith, type Revive the Ummah with knowledge in the comments. Then like, share, and subscribe to Minbar Wisdom, where history speaks and hearts awaken. The modern Indian Muslim, holding faith in a changing world. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The story that began with light upon the shores of Kerala, that traveled through saints and scholars, that built empires and faced invasions, now stands in a new chapter, the age of identity, confusion, and revival. The question is no longer who rules India, but who rules the heart of the Indian Muslim today, a nation of faith and test. Today, India holds over 200 million Muslims, the second largest Muslim population in the world. They walk among temples and churches, among cultures and colors, a living testimony that Islam still breathes amidst diversity. But is not an easy test. Faith must survive amidst rising pressures, media suspicion, cultural misunderstanding, and the constant struggle to preserve Islamic identity in a world that wants faith to fade into silence. Mallam Jiji says, every generation faces its own battlefield. Ours is not with swords, but with souls. The silent strength of Indian Islam. What keeps Indian Islam alive is not politics, it's patience. Through centuries of trials, Muslims held on to the Quran, kept their masajid alive, and raised children who still say La ilaha illallah, even when the world told them to be quiet. From Kashmir to Kerala, from Hyderabad to Delhi. The Adhan still calls. The masjid still stands. The Quran is still recited before dawn. This is not small. This is victory, because survival with faith is greater than success without it. Knowledge as revival. After the colonial era, scholars in India began rebuilding the soul of the Ummah. Institutions like Darul Uloom Deoband, Nadwatul Ulama, and Aligarh Muslim University became the new forts of faith. They produced scholars who taught Islam across continents, who carried the banner of truth from the dust of colonial ruins to the digital screens of the modern world. They proved that the pen is still mightier than the sword when it writes for Allah. The Prophet said, "The scholars are the inheritors of the prophets." Abu Dawud. And indeed, they became the heirs, guardians of faith in a land that once sought to erase it, between modernity and morality. But today's struggle is different. The youth of India face new temptations. Fame over faith, trends over truth, desire over discipline. Social media has become both a minbar and a minefield. Mallam Jiji says, "We scroll more than we supplicate. We post more than we pray. And yet, Allah still calls us back, gently, lovingly, through every verse, every trial, every reminder." If the early Muslims carried Islam by trade, today we must carry Islam by technology, by using every camera, microphone, and pen to speak the truth with adab, wisdom, and light. Unity over division. The modern Muslim in India is tested not only by others, but sometimes by his own brothers. Sectarianism, pride, and internal conflict still weaken the Ummah. Yet, Allah reminds us, "And hold firmly to the rope of Allah, all together, and do not be divided." Surah Al-Imran 3:103. We must rise above our labels and remember our La ilaha. We are not Sunni or Shia first, not Hanafi or Salafi first. We are Muslims first. When unity returns, honor returns. When brotherhood returns, victory returns. The light that never died. From the coast of Kerala to the shrines of Delhi, from the classrooms of Deoband to the streets of Mumbai, the story of Islam in India is not one of defeat, but one of endurance. Empires fell, kings vanished, but the faith of the simple believer, the one who whispers Subhanallah before sleep, that faith never died. That faith is the miracle of Islam in India. And that same faith is what the world needs now. Not a new empire, but a new example. So, my brothers and sisters, our ancestors carried Islam across oceans. They preached with honesty, they served with love, and they sacrificed with dignity. Now it is our turn. Let the world see Islam again, not through arguments, but through your character, your kindness, your patience. If you believe the light of Islam in India must continue to shine, type, "I will carry the torch of faith" in the comments. Then like, share, and subscribe to Minbar of Wisdom, where we tell the stories of the past to guide the hearts of today. Lessons for today. Centuries have passed since Islam first touched Indian shores. Kings rose and fell. Empires came and went. But what remains alive is the message of La ilaha illallah. It survived because it was planted not in politics, but in hearts. And that is the first lesson for us today. Change the hearts, and the land will follow. India's story teaches us that Islam spreads not when we win arguments, but when we win trust. Not when we speak louder, but when we live better. From the traders of Kerala to the saints of Ajmer, from the scholars of Delhi to the people of Kashmir, every soul that embraced Islam did so because they saw truth, justice, and mercy embodied in believers. And that's what the human needs again. Not noise, not anger, but believers who reflect the Prophet's mercy in their homes, their markets, their work, their words. Mallam Jiji says, "If we live like the early Muslims who came to India, Islam will spread again, not by power, but by presence." So what is your role, my brother, my sister? Be that trader who never cheats. Be that neighbor who greets first. Be that friend whose smile carries the warmth of faith. Be that light that reminds people of Allah without even saying a word. Because every time someone sees goodness in you, you are continuing the story that began on India's shores more than 1,000 years ago. Let the world know that Islam is not a religion of war, but a religion of truth, peace, and character. And if you believe this light must continue, type, "Let Islam shine in every heart" in the comments. Then like, share, and subscribe to Minbar of Wisdom, and help this dua reach from Africa to India, from the deserts to the seas, from one heart to another, just like before. Mallam Jiji says, when the world forgets the message of peace, it is time for believers to live it again. Until next time, stay guided, stay peaceful, stay blessed. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.